Hi everybody, welcome back. Going to do another drawing today. And the first thing I'm going to do is to make a very light line that goes across almost in the center. It's not a very good straight line. I'm not very good at drawing straight lines. But it doesn't have to be. I'm just finding the horizon line where the center of my picture is going to be. And I think I'll start off by drawing a little bit of a hillside here. I'm just kind of sketching and scribbling, trying to find exactly what it is that I want to do. I think I'm going to draw a body of water today. I'm going to make the hillside on each side of that body of water, and I want to kind of keep in mind where my horizon line is as I go through this. Let's see, this hillside probably goes up just about like that. It can be however you imagine it. I'm going to make mine like this though. I'm kind of trying to picture this as I go through and imagine what's already back here. I'm going to make some hills in the background. Way back here I'm going to make some much higher hills. Maybe they're big mountains that are way back behind this scenery, and they're way off in the distance. They're huge mountains, but they're way off in the distance. And so when I do those, after I get all this stuff blocked in and I start to create detail on everything, I'm going to make the background details a lot less than the foreground details. In the back, it's basically just going to be kind of some shading. By the way, I'm using a mechanical pencil here. It's Koh-I-Noor mechanical pencil. I always use a 0.5 millimeter lead in these. It's a great pencil to use. I've been using this one for a long time. I've used many different mechanical pencils, but I find that the Koh-I-Noor one is just by far my favorite one. I use it all the time. The weight of it and the balance of it in my hand just feels really good, and the lead puts down a smooth, nice drawing, and I just really enjoy drawing with this pencil, and so I use it all the time. I'm going to block in a couple of trees here. I've made the little shoreline as a hill that kind of goes up, and I'm going to draw in a couple of pine trees there in the distance. Put one way further back here. Pine trees are so fun to draw. I really like drawing those things. You just kind of scribble back and forth with it. I make a line that's going to be kind of the base of it. And then just like this, a straight line. And then on each side of it, I just go back and forth and make these little scribbly lines. And as I go down the tree, I make them a little bit wider. Let's put a bigger one here. This will be fun. You know what, instead of making this be a pine tree, let's make this be a different kind of a tree. This is one that has a much bigger trunk, has a couple of places where it branches off. But again, just like with the pine trees, I'm just scribbling some shapes here. I don't want to draw a lot of individual branches, and I certainly don't want to draw any leaves, because this is so far in the distance that you just can't really see all the leaves individually. You can see kind of shapes of them, the shapes that the leaves when they're all together make, but you don't really see individual ones. So when I scribble out these trees with the leaves, I just make them shapes. That's basically how you draw hair, by the way, if you're drawing people. If you want to draw hair, it's basically handled as a shape. You don't draw individual hairs, because then it looks like they have spaghetti or something on their head, and it just doesn't look right. Same thing if you have facial hair. Some of these baseball players that I draw have great big beards, and I have to draw them as individual shapes, not as hairs, because it just doesn't look right if I make them a bunch of individual hairs. So I have to draw it as a shape with a lot of shading and highlights on it. And that's how I draw the trees too. Here's another pine tree, And I think I'll put some more around that. But just back and forth, I just make them be shapes. You don't see any individual pine needles or anything like that on here. I'm just scribbling back and forth and making the shapes of where all those things come together and make big branches full of pine needles. That's the way that ought to be. See, at the base of this hill, I think I'll start on the other one, make some grass. Have that move down, and you may notice I hardly ever stop moving my pencil. Just keep going, just keep scribbling and drawing whatever looks right to me. And if it doesn't look right, you just keep on going and continue with your drawing. And you may notice I hardly ever use an eraser either. Erasers, I guess, are for really big mistakes, but as we're drawing things like this, it's really hard to make a mistake. You just keep the pencil going, and you just keep scribbling, and things tend to turn out right if you just keep at them and keep going. I've blocked in a few shapes here, and as I get towards the end of this drawing, I'm going to go back and put some more detail on them and make them look a little bit better. But that's just the way you work. You just keep on drawing and not worry about it. You have to make it fun. Just draw for fun. If it isn't fun, then there's no reason at all to be doing it. Do some other thing. I draw because I love drawing. It's very relaxing and very fun to do, and so I do it all the time. I love to just sit anywhere and do this. Like sometimes I'm in my living room and I have the TV on, and I don't even really watch TV, hardly at all. And I'll just sit there and have a sketchbook or have my sketch pad or a bunch of these little trading card size sketch cards, and I'll just sit there with my pencil and just doodle out a bunch of quick little drawings like this one. And it just kind of makes me happy. I just love to do it, and it's something great to do while you're doing other things. A lot of times I'll watch baseball games on TV. I like to watch the ball games, and as I'm doing that, though, I sit there and make sketches like this one quite a bit. Of course, if something exciting is happening in the game, I'll look up at it and watch it, but otherwise I'll just sit there making some sketches. It's a lot of fun to do, and then at the end of it, you have the sketch. All right, this mountain in the background, I'm making some darker lines that go up some of the cracks and crevices that you can see in these higher mountains. I think I'll go down here and try to define a little bit of what I've got in the bottom right of the picture. I haven't done hardly anything with that yet, so let's see what we've got down here. I'm thinking this is probably a small cliff or an embankment that goes down into the water. So I think I want to define what that looks like a little bit. Making some shadows here underneath the overhang of the embankment that goes down into the water. And coming up here in a little bit after I've figured out what all this stuff is and where it goes and what it looks like, then I'll get in and do a lot better detail on them and make them look a little bit sharper and more defined. Of course, this embankment that I'm working on right now is the closest thing to us. If we're taking a picture of this, or if this is a photo, then that's the closest thing to the camera. So I kind of have to look at it that way. Or like if I'm standing there looking at this scenery, this is the closest thing that's to me. I like to make a lot of depth in my pictures. Composition is very important when you're making pictures like this. To have some parts of it that are right up close to you, and other parts that are way, way off in the distance. Adding a bunch of depth to the picture. I just think that's an interesting looking picture. So I try to put things right up close to the camera and way off in the distance. This kind of scenery works really well for that, because you can always draw mountains in the background, and you can make trees up closer to you, or rocks that are up close, or or anything like that that you think. It's kind of your world, so you can kind of create it as you go. That's what I do. I don't have a photo of this or anything like that at all. I'm just making it up as I go. Just deciding where everything ought to be. I think here ought to be a tree. Earlier I made a tree that was not a pine tree. I don't know what kind of a tree this is, but I think as it goes up, it's kind of twists and turns. I think I want to make it kind of an interesting looking tree. The big trunk, I'm going to add a lot of details later, but as I'm going right now, I'm just kind of scratching out. Maybe there's a branch a little bit that goes out. And you can see a little bit of the texture on this tree. It's up close to the camera, up close to your eye, I guess, if you're standing there. So I want to make some detail and show the texture of that tree. Eventually I'll make that thicker lines and really try to bring that forward. But for now I'm just working on the composition of my picture. And I think I'll make another tree right beside that one. And as you can see, I'm just kind of scribbling. I'm not really sure what I'm doing here, and it doesn't matter. I'm just scribbling away and doodling, and seems like there should have been a tree here, so there you go. I'm putting one. And the base of these trees can be kind of a tricky thing. They go down into the ground and they have those big roots. So it's kind of a combination of actually drawing those roots going into the ground and having grass and weeds and things coming up around it. Here in the background, behind those two trees, I'll be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure what I'm drawing here. I'm just making it look a little bit like some branches sticking out. It's all good. It's all going to come together and be just fine at the end. That's the fun of doodling. That's the fun of sketching. Just make whatever you like. Just make lines. Just scribble. Keep your pencil moving. Have fun. If it doesn't look right at the end, it doesn't look right at the end. You can start another one or stop doing it or do whatever you want to do. But I have so much fun with this. I just love drawing it, and I feel good about it, and I think it's going to look just fine at the end. I'm going to stick that branch right out there. Why not? Some of the stuff that I've drawn in between these here are so ill-defined that I'm not quite sure what they are, but when they're back in that distance behind other things, you can just put shading back there, and it kind of creates the illusion of other trees and bushes and grass and high weeds and that kind of stuff. So I'm just creating that. There's another one of those little branches. I'll just make that kind of poke out there from behind the trees. Doesn't make any difference. I'm going to go back in just a little bit and add a little bit more detail to that to push it forward towards us. Right now, though, I'm going to go to this lower hill that's in the back and put a little bit of shading on one side of it. Yeah, there we go. I'm just making some scribbly marks here towards the beginning, the very bottom of it. I'm imagining that's probably where that meets the water. And I need to have something down there to separate them. Let's see, here towards the front of the bank, I think I need to have some grass or some high weeds or some kind of plants just sticking up, and basically all that is just kind of scribbling and making some lines in there, and it's going to look right. Some of them ought to be darker than others, and they all ought to be basically different shapes and different directions, and just kind of drawing them at random is the thing to do here. I'm having a lot of fun with this and just scribbling, moving the pencil quickly all over the place. Some of them I press a little harder and make it a little bit more defined and darker, and other ones are lighter, and so it gives it a little bit of depth that makes the ones that are darker look like they're closer to you. Here's just kind of a line of grass that we can see. Fill that in a little bit darker, make it look a little bit more towards us and darker. There we go. There we go. Yeah. Looks about right to me. So see, just with these simple little scribbles, you can really bring things out and make it look like you want it to look. Here I'm going to make water, and so I'm making some pine trees that are just reflections, really, and all they are is just some scribbles. See how I just made some scribbles back and forth? Well, those are reflections of my pine trees that I drew earlier in the water. And let's see, I'll make another one right here, going off in the distance. If the water's moving at all, your reflection is not going to look just exactly like the tree. It's going to be broken up by the moving water. And so I make that very, very loose and kind of shimmering, just scratchy. I'm defining the bottom of the bank here as I'm doing this. And there's some shading in my water. There we go, those are some reflections. It'll add a little bit of realism, make it look like that's water there. Before I started drawing them, it just looked like the white of the paper showing through, but you know, once you put the reflection, now it almost looks like there's water there. That's what I wanted. I'm going to go back into some of these branches and make them a little bit darker. I just noticed that they're all about the same, and so I'm making a few of them highlighted a little bit, filling in some of this area with just some sketchy lines. That'll help create the illusion that there's all these trees and branches and everything all over the place. Just have some fun with it. Again, this bank is a little bit closer to us than the one behind it, obviously, and so I want to make it a little bit darker and a little bit more defined. This tree over here certainly could use a little bit more detail, so that's what I'm doing. Both of these little guys need to have some texture added to them. I'm just moving the pencil all around and just whatever my eye catches and looks like it ought to be a little darker or have a little bit more detail, I'm just scratching some out here. That's all I'm doing at this point, is just creating some extra stuff. I think we need to have a little bit of reflection down here. I don't want to make it very much, though. Those hills are probably pretty far in the distance, and so I don't want to have a lot of reflection of them, but I do want to have some shading a little bit. There we go. And now you can see how that is looking more like water with the shorelines around it. You know, I think I'll put a little bit of shade up here in the sky. Just very, very lightly. Barely touching that paper with this pencil at all. Just barely touching it. Just scribbling back and forth. Might be a cloudy day. I don't know. And I don't want to draw any clouds or anything like that. I'm just creating the little shade for the sky. Throwing in a couple more details here now that I've made that sky. This sky ought to be a little bit darker. There we go. Here's my bank of mud, I guess it would be, that goes down into the water. And let's work a little bit on these reflections a little bit more. Just using a very light touch for everything that I'm doing until I decide where everything ought to be, and then I can go a little bit darker on it. Yeah, let's go ahead and define this tree back here a little bit better than I have. There we go. Look at that. I think that helped. Put a little bit of shade in the background here. I think that'll help us out a little bit too. Push things forward. Just on the edges of those branches. Make it a little bit darker. Yeah, look at that. See how that looks a little bit more 3D? Yeah, there we go. Just draw it however you like. Make it your world. Make your own trees and water however you want them to look. Whatever makes you happy. That's how I'm doing it. Just make it up as you go. And that is how we do it. This is Sketching 101 with Todd Aaron Smith. Thanks for watching.